Morena, everyone. Kia ora tātou. Welcome to this meeting of Dunedin City Council. We'd like to start this meeting with a prayer from Mr. Colin McLeod, who's the chair of the New Zealand Catholic Bishops Committee.
Thank you. E te atua. As this Dunedin City Council gathers for today's meeting, we give thanks. We're grateful for the many gifts and talents these councillors bring to their mahi in service of this city and its people. We give thanks for their courage to lead with integrity, for their wisdom to make decisions that promote the common good, and for their compassion to consider the needs of all, especially the most vulnerable among us. We give thanks too for the families of these councillors. We know that public service often comes with personal sacrifice, and may their loved ones feel valued. May they also have strength and understanding as they support this council in this important work. And we give thanks for the hopes and the dreams of the people of Dunedin, whom these councillors represent. May their voices be heard and their needs met through the decisions made here today. And may the gifts of each member of this council foster a city that reflects pono, tika and araha, where all can thrive with peace and dignity. And as this meeting begins, may all be united in purpose, respectful in discourse, and ever mindful of our shared responsibility to serve the common good. Hutea te retoa te harakiki, ka hia te koma ko I ko uia mai ki a hau, he maha te mea nui o te au. Māku eki atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. We give thanks for the people. This we pray in a spirit of peace and hope. Amene.
Kia ora. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you. And now we move to public forum, and they are on their way in. So we have the members of Ganesh Pahuja, and members of the Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh. Come on in. So, excuse me, sir, you are Mr. Ganesh Pahuja?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Namaste. Good morning.
Namaste.
Kia ora.
Would you like to begin with a few words?
Sure. His Worship Jules Rodesh and your team at the Auckland City, at the Dunedin City, which is now known as the city of mother of intellectuals. Aham nija paroveti ganana lagu chetasam udar chitranam tu vasudev kutumbakam. Means this is mine, that is yours, is a thinking of narrow-minded people. For the noble, wise people with broad mind, the whole family, the whole world is one big family. That is the meaning of the verse I just said. With those thinking in mind, with those principles in mind, we all today have come here with you on the occasion of the festival which is called Raksha Bandhan. Raksha means protection. Bandhan means bondage. This is a festival which is celebrated in Bharat, India. Commonly seems to be seen as celebrated between brother and sister. But the underlying principles of this festival is bondage, love, and affection. With these principles in mind, we celebrated that festival all over the world on the full moon day, which was on 19th of August. We are here to celebrate this festival, or the principles, with the principles behind this festival, to say thank to the civic servants for us who normally and generally have to compromise their personal comforts to serve the society. We have taken the underlying principle of this festival in a broader way. We started celebrating the same festival. Our organization started in Auckland, where we in 1998, the first time, we celebrated this with the then mayor of Manukau City, Sir Barry Curtis. And it so happened that within a couple of years, the word spread around and all the mayors invited us. And in the occasion when all the mayors of the 6 different cities in Auckland came together and celebrated this festival. In that, the race relation conciliator, the police commissioner of Auckland, all those were present as well.
Now, I've assumed, but are you aware that we only have 5 minutes allocated for public forum speakers?
Oh, sorry.
Which I'm pointing to the clock, which is now finished.
Okay. I was told 10 minutes, but that's fine.
We have 5 minutes for questions. So we have 5 minutes for you to speak, and then 5 minutes for councillors to ask you questions. So do we have any questions? Councillor Mayhem.
I wondered if there was some more you would like to say to us.
You have to restart your microphone.
Thank you. Yes, another lineage of that one. In 1999, United Nations, in a resolution, urged to the member countries to take the message of this peace and harmony to the entire world. And I'm proud to say the Bharat, India, took the initiative and went to all the different continents and countries with this message, and they came under the Vishwa Dharam Prasar Yatra to New Zealand as well in 2003 after there was a break because of the 9/11. So they came to New Zealand in 2003, where our ex-Prime Minister Sir David Longi was honored as a Hindu Ratna Award, and he was the awardee among the other 4 awardees from the community. We as an organization, as I said, we started in 1996 in New Zealand. We run regular programs, weekly programs, all over the country in 7 different cities, where for hour to 2 hours of a session of the youth development program. And when I say youth, you can see our youth here, starting from the age of 2 months old to the maybe 50 plus. Those are our youths, and the program is so designed to inculcate the values and the feeling of oneness, and to connect to the society, the local society, which is our Karam Bhumi, in a way that we need to serve, we need to look after, we are part of this one, so you be part of this one. I think more questions.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervis.
You've said that this is mine and that is yours in a way that suggests that you don't really approve. Surely this is mine and that is yours is the fundamental of capitalism and ownership. What aspect of that ownership do you think gets in the way of the feeling of oneness that you've spoken of?
When we look in the society, we see hatred, hate, that comes from inequality. And if the so-called privileged people, whichever way, education, finance, whichever aspect you touch, if they feel the person at the other end or at the lower end is and must be given the same opportunity, those sort of things, when they are not to that level, are the hindrances, and we are working to bring that balance so that the society feels oneness among themselves.
Thank you. We appear to have exhausted questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So now we'll move on. There was talk of the string. What's happening? Right. So part of this presentation was that bracelets would be offered, string bracelets would be offered to the councillors who would like them in recognition of celebration of the festival, Raksha Bandhan, correct? So if we could hand those out now. Thank you. Sure. Wonderful. Thank you. Very good.
Unrelated.
Yes.
Sorry. What's your name? My name's Allah. Nice to meet you.
All right. All right. Thank you, councillors. We shall resume the meeting. And moving on to apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Steve Walker. And so I move that we accept that apology. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. I'll put the motion that we accept the apology of Councillor Walker. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item number 4, Councillor Houlihan will be able to move the confirmation of the agenda. Not listening. Would you like to move confirmation of the agenda, Councillor? Very good. Seconder, Deputy Mayor Lucas. Is there any commentary, any questions about the agenda? No, thank you. Therefore, I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Number 5, item number 5, declarations of interest.
I have 2 seconds, Mr.
Oh.
Mayor. 2 seconds,
Oh,
Mr. Mayor.
we have an alteration.
Well, yes, is that what Councillor Houlihan moved? I think it might have been. Yes. That's what I said. Yeah. Good. Just so we're clear.
Just so we're clear that there is an alteration in the order, but luckily Councillor Houlihan saw that on the screen and that's what she was referring to. Just to check that everyone else has seen it. Is there any I have a moment to digest that. Keep them together. So the purpose of this change is to keep the 2 carbon zero reports together. So, yep, there's no commentary on that, therefore we can move along to declarations of interest, item 5 on the agenda. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role and any private or external interest they have. Are there any changes or updates? I see none. Therefore, I move that Council notes the elected members' interest register. It's attached and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members and for ELT's members' interest. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Gilbert. Any commentary? No. Therefore, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item 6. Confirmation of minutes from an ordinary council meeting that took place on the 31st of July 24. Are there any questions about that? I see none. Therefore, I'll move that Council confirms the public part of those minutes as a correct record. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Mayhem. Any discussion? I see none. Therefore, I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. 6.2, an extraordinary council meeting held on 19 August. Are there any questions about the minutes? I see none. Therefore, I'll move that Council confirms the public part of the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on 19 August 24. Second for that, Deputy Mayor Lucas. Any commentary? No. I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Reports. Number 7 on the agenda. Actions from resolutions of council meetings. Is there any commentary from the Chief?
I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Are there questions? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A point of clarification, and possibly the Chief can answer this. I have asked, I think probably 3 rounds now of as Converse as Council around the Peninsula Connection, the resolutions, the one from last year that's still to be actioned from annual plan, and then the one that's being actioned from the annual plan this year, around where they would appear in our resolutions. And there was some thought they might be in the work program. They're not been in the resolution list or the work program for ISCOM or council now. I see it turns up in the 9-year plan list, but it doesn't have the detail of the resolution, which is problematic because there's some of that detail that's important. And in terms of us being able to ask questions about that and ask about progress, that's what this is about, tracking and checking in and so forth. It doesn't allow for that. So I'm just wondering why that is the case and what can be done about it.
Councillors, and this is a general thing, the 9-year plan forward work program captures a volume of work, of which the peninsular connections, plural, form part of it. But we are not doing resolution tracking in that work program, and you'll see that's an item on your agenda papers. And so that's where that work is captured, because it is now a matter for the 9-year plan.
So I did notice, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is one resolution in there that is specifically mentioned in terms of the number and so forth, but not in that case. It just seems that there's an inconsistency and I just wonder when this all changed, because I was told at the time when I asked at ISCOM and then when I asked previous council meetings that they would show up on the other one, and that hasn't happened, but obviously a decision's been made that I've been unaware of.
The action itself is being captured. You can be certain that staff are aware of the various resolutions in the report is progressing, and the 9-year plan work program shows that it is due in January.
Apologies for pursuing this, but for the community there isn't that transparency, and given this project fell between the cracks previously because we had changes in staff and so on and so forth, that is problematic because it's not transparent, and in the resolution the detail says the report will come in December and it's showing as the report coming in January, and that is a very important point for the community.
I can tell you why. All the reports that involve the prioritisation or otherwise of capital projects will come to a single meeting, so that council have all of the projects in front of them at a single time, so they can make choices about what they want to include or otherwise. And so making a decision in isolation of all of the other reports won't be happening. So all you'll see from the forward work program for the 9-year plan, that all of the decision-making reports that involve budgets will be part of the January budget meetings.
Well, finally, that is problematic because we have a council resolution on the books, and that is in contrast to that. But there's really nothing else to say.
And as Chief Executive, there is an ability to change the timing of reports, and there's a consistency with considering all of the capital program as an entirety. So council are able to weigh up various things that they want to include or not include in the round.
Very good. Next question is Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. On page 41, in relation to the Masters Games, and this is on the completed action list, and I understand that the invoices have been written off and that part's been completed, but the part of the motion that was agreeing for the Masters Games Trust to collaborate with the council to ensure the event's future sustainability has not been completed. So maybe that part of the motion needs to stay on as... Okay.
And it does, and I can advise that initial discussions have already been held about that. But yes, you're quite right, and I'll make sure Lynn splits that out.
Thank you. A question, Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you. Just a question on the item at the bottom of page 39, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if we've had any further communication from government about our concerns at their failure to deliver on their election promises about the hospital build.
Well, I have had no communication from government other than what is the continued progress on the hospital. So we can see outpatients proceeding well, and it looks like the foundations or the piles for inpatients have been finished, and we await the next stage of the foundations to go on top of those piles. So I think some of those piles are just being filled, and then we're on to their next stage. I've heard nothing from any government members, and I did speak to a few last week, and about any cancellation or slowing or anything else. I did hear commentary from a member of a government department talking about how expensive it was, and that other projects have been slowed or stalled so that the Dunedin Hospital can proceed. So I took some comfort from that.
Thank you.
That's as much as I can report. Are there any other questions? Thank you. So, therefore, I'll move that Council notes the open and completed actions from resolutions of council meetings as attached. Is there a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Lucas, is there any commentary? No? In which case I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 8, the forward work program for council. Is there any opening remarks from the Chief Executive? No. Are there questions for the Chief? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. On top of page 46, financial results. I had been expecting the July financial results to be on the agenda, and I understand that the Chief Financial Officer has a timetable of ensuring that we get each month's results. I just wanted to check in on that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the financial results will be coming monthly. The first month is due to come to the Finance Committee in a couple of weeks.
That's great, thank you. And then from then on, every month we'll get, whether it's to Finance or to Council, depending on the timing of the meetings.
Correct.
Does anyone else have a question? Councillor Fiso.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor. My question relates to reading on page 45 about the zero carbon stuff, which actually impelled me to remember presentations on, and maybe a resolution in 2022 of the city portrait work, which to me as an Indigenous Pacific person was really exciting, because the main feature was the involvement of Indigenous perspectives and mana whenua in that. So where is that work, please? Or is the work happening?
Yes, the work is happening. I believe there is a councillor workshop scheduled, is it tomorrow? Tomorrow, to look at other models as part of the broader city portrait work, just reassessing the SDGs as part of that, and then there will follow on a report to spec. Is that the plan? Yeah.
Just make a note of that. Are there any other questions? Very good. I see none. Therefore, I'll move that Council notes the open and completed actions from resolutions of Council as attached. Seconded, Councillor Gilbert. Is there any commentary? I see none. Therefore, I put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 9, the 9-year plan, forward work program. Yes, some comments from Chief Executive?
And so apologies from Ms Bodecker, who can't be here. She pulled this together. And I acknowledge what Councillor Gary said about the inconsistency with one of the items having a resolution number but none of the others. This is an attempt to show what we are attempting to bring to Council as part of the 9-year plan. It's and it's a manual process, so they're cumbersome to pull together. And I acknowledge that there is a lack of alignment potentially between the three of them, but it's a manual process. This is just to show you and to give you a sense of where and when to expect the work to be undertaken. So that I'm happy to take any questions on the program as it is.
First question is Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's on page 51 around the engagement, and I see there's some early engagement for October, but I wondered if we would be getting a report on the consultation session engagement for everything, I guess, because we've got a whole lot of consultations going on, and also about, the report before we go to the engagement so we can decide for our community whether it's appropriate.
Yes, I think in reviewing that, I think there is likely to be something required in September on that, but this is iterative, but yes.
Thank you. On page 53, there's a property matter there, and it talks about 258 King Edward Street cost to fix, and there is, I guess, a whole bunch of stuff with cost to fix. So we're also going to be looking at whether we sell these items as well.
There will be a discussion. I think once councillors have asked to understand the costs to fix of some of these. So once you understand that, then it'll be for council to decide what it wants to do.
And my last question is just around these same page 53, there's strategic report, and I just wondered whether strategic refresh, I know the work's going on, fits within the 9-year plan. Strategic support. It's on the bottom of page 53. Is it the top line? So it says a strategic overview content report in December, but that's kind of not the strategic
Bottom
refresh.
Of 53. It's the bottom of 53.
So I'm just looking across to any of the GMs if they are able to. That might be something I'll need to talk to Sharon and Ms Morand about and make sure that we capture it in there.
I guess the intention for that was to finish that work by November, December, so somehow it needs before the or during the long-term plan. It also aligns with the engagement as well.
Team, can we just take a note of that and make sure we get that included? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and acknowledgement to the team. It's a very long list. The last 4 items, page 54, obviously the first 2 around Three Waters, there are other factors involved in determining the timing, but the last 2, what would you expect would be the timing of those, Chief?
Transport Place is dependent on other parties, so I can't know that. Fulton Mar, I would expect by January, but again, that will depend on staff capacity around that because the same staff are involved in a number of those reports.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. Thank you. On page 54, I don't notice the inclusion of any mention of the Shaping Future Dunedin transport projects. Is that because they're all funded and running, or is there some other reason for their absence?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, so that's BAU, but we'll also cover that in our activity reporting when Transport do their activity report to you.
Thank you. And I'd make the same observation about Central City Plan and ask, does that include the work we requested about possible changes for the Octagon? If not, where's that, please?
As I recall, Councillor, the resolution of Council was to consider the remainder of the Central City Plan, including the Octagon, as part of that wider piece of work, scoping it up. So the Octagon was bundled into that, is my recollection of where we landed. And Rob's nodding.
Thank you.
Just as a point of clarification, that's only scoping up the work. That is not there's no commitment to timing or phasing of any of that work. It will just be bringing it as a whole piece of work. Yep, just so everyone did.
Are there any further questions? I see none. Therefore, I'll move that Council notes the updated Council Forward Work Programme as shown in Attachment A for the 9-year plan Forward Work Programme. Seconded, Councillor Gilbert. Is there any commentary? No? In which case I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 10. Submission on the redesign of the vocational education and training system. So we have Ms. Moran and Mr. Decker. Would you like to preface, give us some opening comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Gary.
Mr. Decker, I think this is one for you. In the commentary, there's mention of the slower growth of international student numbers compared with, I would suggest, compared with tertiary university, which is more like 75% bouncing back. Would you have any comment on that around, it talks about it being marketed from in a national sense rather than specific to Te Puti, Dunedin. Any comment around any other reasons or that reason for that aspect being problematic as part of a larger whole as opposed to a standalone institution?
The situation for Otago Polytech has been essentially that they've been unable to represent themselves in market directly for the last several years, and it's an assumption that that's meant that their rate of recovery has been quite a lot lower since borders reopened than comparable bodies like university, and even the secondary schools have rebounded a lot more quickly.
And so if they were standalone, that would improve the situation and therefore the income from the international education sector?
Yeah, I would make that assumption too.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm on page 93, just looking at the submission on paragraph 7, so point, and then it's got a paragraph there about the DCC does not support replacing worker development councils with the proposed industry training boards. That paragraph there, and I was curious as to how the DCC arrived, I guess, at that decision, because I read the information and then I went to the presentation by the Minister last week. So I just wonder what the key points around that are, and if that's supported by the Polytech or Business South, etc.
That's from our direct experience in staff, and also had conversations with Councillor Gilbert around his view, which was supported in the way we've written this, and talked about it within our team regarding the proposed replacement for workforce development councils not being inclusive of some industry areas which are of significance in the Dunedin economy.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Following on from the international students question, why was it that they weren't able to go out to, advocate for themselves for students? What was the reasoning in that?
The Tipu Kinga model took all of international marketing for the Polytech body as a whole to a centralised office, and so whilst Otago Polytech retained some staff who supported students who were here and could speak at a level, they didn't have the ability to speak much more than that. So that was held centrally at our office in Hamilton.
And then at that central level, did they just divvy up the students that were acquired, or how did they work that? How did they say this Polytech gets them and this one doesn't?
I'm not sure about that. I think the best way to think of this is actually that the system as a whole wasn't able to speak with much clarity, and it was confusing when they were in market. I'm not sure that they were potentially back at a position where that divvying up was relevant.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Mr. Decker, on page 93, our submission, the second last point on the page around the funding related to disabled learners and Māori and Pacific learners. And I note that we've noted our concern around that, and there's no option being offered in place of that. What is the likely outcome of that, taking away that funding?
I'm not sure is the short answer. I would take from the nature of the whole proposal for change is that it's going to go back to institutions rather than a centralised process.
Councillor Gilbert.
I have to word this as a question. Were you aware that at the presentation last week or the week before or whatever it was, that the ministry, when they were here talking about that, mentioned that the funding that would otherwise have gone to, or otherwise go to disabled or Māori or Pacifica, would then be putting into a pool, and the, if you like, the price for an average, a general student would then go up. And their comment was that the pool would remain the same, it would just be allocated differently. Were you aware of that? Cool. The second question is, one thought I did have subsequent is, whilst we can't instruct in terms of what level to train or what areas are of concern, and again I agree, WDCs have a more local focus. One focus that we do have locally that is short heritage skills, for example, and they still don't appear on the endangered species list. Whether there is a way of including that, some focus needs to be given on what skills are on the endangered species list.
Agree.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you very much. Okay, so that being the case, Councillor Wiley has indicated a willingness to move, and I'll second that. So, Councillor Wiley, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you. I would say this was, when we look at the whole Te Pukenga experience, was an interesting failure in education, in my view. And I want to thank the Honourable Penny Simmons for getting this action so quickly within the term, in the first year of National being elected. But I think the key thing is this goes much deeper, what the politics are. It really is a part of our, as they say in the point 3, a flagship organisation of our community. It is a critical part of Dunedin. And I want to thank Megan Potiki, Acting Executive Director of Otago Polytechnic and Regional 4 Director, Te Pukenga, and Max Sims, Deputy Executive Director Operations, Otago Polytechnic, who came and spoke at our Economic Development Committee on the 7th of August about the redesign and what was going to take place. We did have a very strong entity pre-2020 when they all got rolled up, and there were extremely strong relationships throughout the community, and we've heard Councillor Gary talking about the international education and how that took place, but it went a lot deeper. It went along around how a lot of the workforce was trained according to what was required here in Dunedin and across Otago Southland. I want to, in noting this report, this letter and submission, I want to note, I feel for the staff there. What they've been through, the washing machine of actions over the last 4 or 5 years has just been absolute turmoil for them, and hopefully they see some light at the end of the tunnel with this, and I hope this gets actioned relatively quickly by the government, and we can actually get Otago Polytechnic back on its feet, delivering for Dunedin, Otago and the southern part of the country, and bring it back to its former glory. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yep, I'll support this motion. I think I want to also thank Megan Potiki and others for coming and asking us to take the stance and to help and support them. That's what it's not our core business, but I think that's what our council should look at doing as often as possible, is advocacy for our city and what's best for the city. For example, our hospital campaign. I think, this has a huge impact on our city, and the example of the international students and the fact that the numbers are low at Otago just shows that the unique selling points of the region are not being promoted at all in a central basis. So when they're promoting Te Pūkanga as a whole block, individual areas just aren't getting any highlighting at all, which misses a whole lot of our features for the amazing things there are about our city and about the Otago Polytechnic, which is world leading on lots of its different courses and, is a fantastic institution to attend. So I think that's just a great example of how poor this merger is.
Councillor Gary?
Thank you. I believe that when it comes to education and other such entities, that no matter what the stripes of a government, occasionally there are projects that are so far down the track that to turn them around yet again is so disruptive. I wasn't a supporter of the national model, the Te Pūkanga model, but I believe it was so far advanced that turning it around has just provided more uncertainty in the area. However, we've got what we've got. I too want to acknowledge the staff. I know a number of staff who've in fact been made redundant several times through this process and have had to reapply for their jobs 2 and 3 times, which is just unreasonable. Yes, the Otago Polytechnic was, before the changes, a particularly innovative and strong institution and one that we were very proud of. And so it is good to be able to advocate and support it towards that again. On the matter of international education, it has been very difficult to interact, not because there aren't good people there, but because those roles have changed over time frequently in the last couple of years. And so getting any traction with that is difficult, and that model of promoting Dunedin as part of a national whole has been very problematic for us and for their staff. The figures that I have are a 37% return on international student numbers for the Polytech, as compared with University of Otago's 75% return. And the international education sector is coming back really strongly in other areas, but Polytech has really struggled locally. We know that we have a great institution here. We know we have great staff, and all I can do is say how much I have valued their expertise, and I look forward to when they're settled in their roles and don't have this dreadful uncertainty, and that the Polytechnic will go from strength to strength. On the matter of disabled and Māori and Pacifica learners, I am really alarmed about the government's proposal in this regard, because those groups are particularly vulnerable, have previously had low attainment, and we should be doing everything we can to support them, and to lose that funding, that is of real concern. So that's an area we need to watch and advocate for as well. I'm happy to support the motion.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just going to say my message really is back to Wellington, and that is that please stop doing this. Basically, if the previous government had left the structure alone, we wouldn't require this to go back again. And this is happening too often in New Zealand between governmental changes. We are wasting vast amounts of resources as policy swings from one side of the aisle to the other. And so please, Wellington, stop damaging us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. I will be brief because, as you know, on this topic I can talk for quite some time. Before its inception, trades and industries were saying, yes, we need change, but this is not the change we need. So do these changes address everything? No, they don't. But it is at least veering back towards what both the advisors and the industry were asking for. The logic of smushing together underperforming entities with well-functioning and performing ones like Otago Polytech was before central government chose to step in and try and help has never made any sense to me. So I echo what others have said. I'd like to express my thanks to Megan Portuguese as well as the wider team at Otago Polytech for the patience, the resilience and the continued passion for training our rangatahi. And I would also echo Councillor O'Malley's sentiments by saying, central government, stop trying to help. That would be handy.
Right. So just before I hand it back, I'd just like to make 2 points. Firstly, that Dunedin is an education city, and we have proven over a very long period of time, with having the first university and the first polytechnic in the country, that we're capable of running those institutions right here. So we don't need them to be centralised, and we don't need them to take that autonomy away from us, because we've well proven that we're very capable of using it. And I suppose in terms of the university situation, 80% of the students come from out of town for university, but similarly large numbers of Polytech students have come from out of town to get that vocational learning. And similarly, that and over and above that, the Polytechnic provides a clear pathway to productivity in our society, and in some cases redemption, and in some cases a complete change of attitude and lifestyle for young people. By going to the Polytech and embarking on a course of learning that gives them opportunities for tasks, different occupations. So it's a very critical part of our society and the fabric, a very critical part of the fabric of our place as an educational city. So having been to some of those graduations, I'm very impressed with the people that have really made a significant step up, into a different world, which is fantastic. And I think it's very important that is able to be continued, especially here in Dunedin. Back to you, Councillor Wiley.
I have nothing to add, thank you.
In which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 11. So we have 11 followed by 11S2, which is the supplementary 2, which is the S2 is the zero carbon implementation plan, which is the change we made at the beginning of our agenda. So firstly, we have the draft terms of reference for the advisory panel. And we'll have some introductory comments, starting with the Chief.
So, councillors, you will have seen we have circulated an updated version following some feedback from councillors for that, and we have a mover and a seconder for that has been circulated to you, which is a slightly updated version from what is in your papers.
Now, sorry, you had a mover and a seconder for that. Right, but do we need to do that first, or we could do that as part? Very good. Okay, so we have further introductory comments from...
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor. No, happy to take questions.
All right. Ms Reynolds, no? No? Okay. Mr McLean, thank you. Okay, first question, Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. I'm sort of troubled by what seems to me to be the proposal for a committee reporting to another committee and it being called an advisory panel. And my question is, why is this panel made up of elected members when normally if you have an advisory panel, it's outsiders, an expert architect, an urban planner or whatever it might be, with our other advisory panels who reach out into the community? It seems to me that I'm yet to see any useful purpose in yet another internal step of monitoring. Can you help me see the light, please?
Well, this has been requested by councillors, and it is different than some of those other ones that you reference where we have brought in external expertise. This is monitoring an in-house program of work.
When you say it's been requested by councillors, can you elaborate, please?
A steering group, an advisory group, is in response to a resolution of council to develop one.
If I may add, it also proposes that the advisory panel can co-opt others, including externals, if desired.
I see that, but I'm yet to hear any response to my concern that it's entirely internal and it's a group of councillors monitoring staff work that can be reported to a committee anyway, and this committee meets to oversee and report to the same committee. I don't understand what possible value can be added by this, the introduction of this group. In fact, I believe it will slow down the essential implementation of all our carbon zero work. Can you respond to that?
Well, Councillor, this report is simply responding to a request from Council last year. Your comments, I guess, are for the debate and whether or not Council wishes to proceed on that basis.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Gilbert.
Just one. Under the, excuse me, the quorum, I have always thought that a quorum needed to be half plus one. And by my count, it is half minus about 0.5. So I'm just curious as to how the number 3, given you've got, as I understand it, the chair of spec, mayor or deputy mayor, chair or deputy chair of ISCOM, finance, economic, deputy chair of spec, plus mana whenua, that to me makes 7. So I'm just wondering why we're down to 3 for a quorum.
The quorum requirements are generally far tighter in standing orders for things governed by standing orders, where they have decision-making powers. So you want to have a robust number of people there if you're making decisions. This is advisory, so.
Councillor Gary.
This one possibly for you, Chief. So, gee, thanks, she says. Just looking at the list, because I suddenly realised that I popped up in here as Deputy Chair of Economic Development, so that was news to me. But the work that this is focused on affects people, and yet we don't see in the community, and yet we don't see the Chair of Community in here, which is surprising. So I just wondered what the thinking was, because this work, the success of it, affects the community.
The highlighted changes have been suggested by councillors. I guess if you have alternative suggestions for who you want on the group, and it does have the ability to co-opt if necessary, I guess this is the opportunity to suggest changes.
So I need to move something? If I wanted to add somebody to it, what's the process, Chief?
This has been moved. This is the redrafted one. We've got an indication from the Chair of Spec and the Deputy Mayor that they intend to move in this direction. So you could either, before it's moved and seconded formally, you could ask for a change, and that could be made immediately. If that change isn't accepted, you would then need to do it as an amendment.
So I haven't even consulted with the Chair of Community, but I would just ask the mover and seconder whether they would contemplate that addition.
I think we better take 5 for a bit of conference, because of course the chair of regulatory, because it'll end up requiring regulations, but it's probably potential for inclusion as well, and I'm not sure about civics. So anyway, 5 minutes. Yes, in favour say aye. Against, carried. We'll have 5 minutes. Yep. So we'll reconvene and come back to item 11, and we have a new and improved resolution on the screen behind me. So who was going to move? Deputy Mayor Lucas was going to move that, and seconded by Councillor Barker. So would you like to speak to it?
Just briefly, I reflected on the membership and thought that it would be, we want to keep this a relatively small group, and that's why we've changed it to chair or deputy chair of each of those committees, and they are the key committees who have some oversight involvement in terms of zero carbon, and I thought it was very important that we had a mana whenua representative around that table, and I believe that one of the reps that we already have on either on infrastructure services or strategy planning and engagement would be the right representative. And I think it's very important that it's a quarterly meeting rather than 6 monthly. I just think that's too long to keep on track. And I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to it? Councillor Gary.
Thank you to the mover and seconder for their preparedness to include the chair of Community Services Committee. And the reason I suggested that is that at the core of our Zero Carbon 2030 strategy and implementation plan are people, the people of the city. It's around addressing elements that affect climate change, and climate change, after all, is we're right in the middle of it. We are being affected, but those who are most affected are the vulnerable in our community, and it's around the people of this city. So that makes sense to have the chair of community services there. So I thank her. I hadn't actually asked her ahead of that whether she would be prepared to, but she has very quickly said yes, so that's excellent. I too wondered at the reason for this group. It feels like an extra step, and I do hope that consideration is given to co-opting people from the community, because advisory panels work really well with our community involved. This just feels like an extra step from within the organisation that is unnecessarily. I think we all are interested in progress in this area, and it could be as easily dealt with by quarterly reports. However, I'm happier now seeing that addition.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Initially when I looked at it, I thought, I wonder why all chairs aren't listed there, because of course carbon zero impacts on everything we do in our city, and on every element of every committee. So, however, I think we will all get a chance to have a say when it comes to strat. That's the way I assume that's the case. So.
All right. Councillor Barker.
As seconder, I just want to give a little bit of the history. In September 2023, when we adopted the plan, we did request a report for the October 2023 council meeting and governance options for the oversight of the implementation of the zero carbon plan, and that was carried by Division 14.1. So it's not news that we are putting this panel together. It was also mentioned in what was motion carried in spec, with Councillor Vandervis recording his vote against it. So this has been work in progress. We have a few challenges around, I guess, the framework of managing our carbon zero. We have the Zero Carbon Alliance, which I have always felt sits at an operational level, but despite my asking for Business South to be included with its 1,300 members and its commitment to carbon positive, that hasn't happened. So there's somewhere in the system, the partnerships are not working. So I think that part of the terms of reference are pretty wide in there, is to have a look at some of that stuff. There's also 125 actions on this carbon zero plan, and as governance oversight we're very across all of the work, like the waste minimisation plan, etc., so we can take that strategic look at it. I personally want to see it morph into a climate action plan, including the adaptation. I've been pushing for the climate adaptation plan. We've also seen, I don't know how recently it came out, but the ORC now have their draft strategic climate action plan. So I would like to see some governance work alongside the council with this as well. If we have committed, as we have, to carbon zero by 2024, then we actually do need to get fast action. We committed in 2019, we got the plan in 2023, and I want to make sure that this work proceeds fast and uses impactful decisions to make sure that we are getting more bang for the buck.
Thank you. Right of reply? Nothing further. Okay, I'll put them. Oh, Councillor Vincent-Pope, yes.
It will be clear from my questions that I can't support this. I can't see that yet another interpolation of another committee that meets twice a year, or may meet twice a year and report to another standing committee, irrespective of the membership of the group, can add any value or any immediacy or urgency to the implementation of our agreed policy on reducing carbon and emissions. So I won't be supporting what I consider a piece of futility.
Point of order.
Yes.
Doesn't quarterly mean 4 times a year?
Correct.
Thank you.
It's a minor adjustment. I'm sure Councillor Vincent-Pope is happy to amend his statement from twice a year to 4 times a year. Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Okay, in which case I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Aye. Carried. Would you like that recorded, Councillor? Here we go. Item S2, 11S2, which is the proposed zero carbon implementation plan, which you have in a supplementary agenda. So, should we have some opening comments, Mr. McLean? Ms. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple. You will notice the proposed implementation plan is very, very detailed. So there may be questions pop up that the GMs in the room may be able to answer, but we may have to come back to you with any detail that we can't answer here and now. And the other reason it is still proposed, even though it's for the current year, and part of the reason for that was to allow for the establishment of the advisory panel so that they can have input and oversight over the current year's implementation of the plan. Thank you.
Very good. Questions? Starting with Councillor Vandevers.
There are an awful lot of proposals for this plan here. Is it possible to briefly let us know which ones are going to be particularly expensive in terms of staff time and other resources? My concern is the financial sustainability, which in the past seems to me to have been glossed over. So are there any particular actions that are proposed here in the descriptions that actually carry a fairly substantial cost?
Thanks, Councillor. I can't give you a dollar figure of any particular action, but they are within the current year's budget. So the budget's already been set.
And can I just add, Councillor, if I might, that a lot of the things we're doing are built into how we do things. So because this council has had a clear direction about needing to achieve carbon outcomes, we've changed just quietly in the background many of the ways we do things. So we've built it into just our bog standard business as usual.
I understand all that, and I can see the reasons for it, but my question really is, why can't we get really some clear understanding when we're voting for these things of what the serious cost implications are? I understand that a lot of these things can be done without any significant cost, and it's part of the way staff are doing things anyway. But what I would like is for some identification of the particularly expensive actions that we could know in advance rather than learn about them later when the money's been spent.
Most of the actions in the implementation plan are underway by other departments, and it's something that they would have done regardless of zero carbon. but we've worked with the teams to pull together those actions that will have an impact on emissions reduction. For example, there's a lot of work underway in the waste space. Those are all listed here, but it's not something that, for the most part, it's not things that have been kicked off for zero carbon goals specifically, because this implementation plan is something that needed to be delivered from within existing budgets and resource levels.
If I may add to that, Councillor, is when we prepare the 9-year plan, we'll be bringing a list of all of the business as usual activities that contribute to zero carbon outcomes, and also the additional high and medium investment packages that Council have asked for. So you'll be able to identify what's built into our BAU budgets and then the additional for Council to consider.
So just to clarify, when we get the 9-year plan, it will be quite clear what the high investment budgets are for these particular zero carbon aims.
Yes.
Okay. Just as a adjunct to that, would it be worthwhile having a benefit cost ratios on each of these? When you come up, you could do an estimate of benefit cost ratios so that things can be ordered in terms of benefit cost ratios or prioritised in terms of benefit cost ratios.
When we created the zero carbon plan, we really thought about, we built in the co-benefits and also considered the emissions reduction potential of different actions. For these ones, we do have some of that information because they were all built into that original spreadsheet that was presented to Council back in September. And for, I suppose, that's more something that we could do around the future, future further investment above additional resourcing, if that's useful.
Okay. Yeah, well, certainly I'd find it useful in terms of viewing it.
If I may, the cost-benefit ratios are really hard to do for a number of the things that Council do because we are the only people who deliver certain services. So it makes it really difficult to do a cost-benefit analysis of a playground, for example, that might be implemented in a way that is zero carbon friendly, but the benefit of that is hard to know. So I wonder that the oversight group will be able to ask questions, and maybe that's the place where some of those discussions can happen. But I'm not sure that with the other work that staff are already doing on high, medium and low scenarios, whether there's a need to do more.
Well, we'll see how it pans out. Yes, Councillor Adams.
Sorry, one final suggestion. Given that it is hard to tease out the costs of a lot of this, would it be possible to simply identify things like the counting of carbon footprints of all our departments? I think we've got 40 of them, and the paperwork that's associated with that. The costs of that, I would have thought, would be something that would be fairly easy to determine, and harder to determine, but also something I think should be looked at, and that is the cost of insisting that all our contractors look at tabulating their carbon footprint as well. This is a lot of information that I haven't seen being usefully used, but expensively collected for some time.
The DCC footprint work is progressed from within the zero carbon team budget, which is part of the annual plan and previous 10-year plan. That's one of 3 work streams. In terms of the procurement, everything's done on a case-by-case basis, weighing up all the different elements of procurement.
Sorry, Councillor. Talking with some of our larger contracting partners, infrastructure type contractors, it's fairly standard for them now right across across the country when they're procuring for large contracts. That's a requirement for a lot of councils and a lot of their clients. So for them to calculate and understand their footprint is BAU for them. So couldn't tell you the costs attributed to DCC contracts, but it's something that they build into their business models.
Okay, but given that a third of what we do ourselves is counting our own carbon footprint, surely that's got to be an easily quantified number that you can let us know about.
We could probably estimate that, yes.
Okay, we have a few questionnaires lined up. So next we have Councillor Barker, followed by Councillors Wiley, Houlihan, Lucas, Gilbert and Benson Pope. And Councillor Gary. So Councillor Barker first.
Sorry, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to foreshadow that I'd like to move what's on the paper, but also add in refers the proposed implementation plan to the Zero Carbon Advisory Panel to refine the implementation plan for approval by Council before the 1st of December 2024. And I guess the reason that I'm just going to highlight that is there's 125 actions and I probably have 125 questions, which I'm not going to go through individually. One of my key ones was that many of these things are business as usual, and I just wondered, because I kind of had to go through and analyse it all, if it would be possible when we're doing the implementation plan to put the business as usual stuff in there more clearly.
Yes, certainly. Yep.
And then my next question is just around there's some that have partner led, but it doesn't say who the partner leader is, whether it's the ORC or someone else, and that would actually be really useful when we're having conversations with some of those groups. So can we put the names of the partners on those, please?
Yes, we can.
And next question just around energy. This is page 16 and we're looking at the Andersons Bay crematorium, and I'm sure the crematorium came up in another meeting. It was about the financial viability of it and the competition, because more crematoriums have come up. So we're looking at upgrading to LPG boilers, but I just wondered if we'd looked at whether we keep doing the crematorium work.
That is a discussion probably for the 9-year plan, and there is stuff happening. I could probably provide more detail in a different forum.
Okay, I'm just questioning putting investment into something where I thought that that the crematorium might, I'm not quite sure how old it is, but it's just having, hence the need for a governance, which has that big oversight on stuff like this.
Yes, and your point is well made, and staff are aware of the other things that need to be taken into account around this.
My next question, page 18, there's a whole lot of economic development stuff here, and I am aware that the economic development strategy is being done at the moment, the refresh, and a lot of this stuff would fit into the refresh. So how is that happening? What's the process for that to happen?
The process of zero carbon being built into the refresh, is that your question? Yes. Our team is in conversation with the relevant people writing that strategy and looking at options. There's a lot of positive overlap that we're looking to include.
My next question, so I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, I'll just take a break while I figure out what my next question is. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Can I just get an explanation on when we look at this layout, emission reductions potential where it says minor, major priority, high, what was the other reference? Moderate, sorry. High, very high. How did you come to that?
Good question. So these are based off the full list that was presented to Council back in September 2023. The emissions reduction potential was analysed by looking at the total tonnes of carbon CO2e in the modelling, and then analysing DCC's role and potential level of influence over that, and then looking across the different action areas and apportioning that out across the different action areas.
Okay, so in the papers, the council papers, at the end of July, 2.1, we were given the DCC emissions overview where it showed waste at 33,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions, and closed landfills at 8,147 tonnes of CO2 emissions, and wastewater treatment at 7,738 tonnes of CO2 emissions. And then we go down to air travel, hotels, etc. at 100, and staff working from home at 4. So when I look at the paper we've got in front of us, I am thinking actually waste, closed landfills and wastewater treatments, if we were able to, I would have thought they would have had the highest priority, because a 3% reduction across that would have dramatically more effect than a 10% reduction, especially in some of these other areas like water treatment plant chemicals, which were 2,000.
So the paper from July relates to DCC's emissions footprint specifically, rather than the citywide community footprint, which this paper relates to. So waste is very big for DCC's emissions because we own and operate the landfill. So we have responsibility for that. At the city level, waste and wastewater treatment, I believe, is about 6% of city emissions. So that's why there's that difference there. At the same time, DCC has more influence over that than some other areas, because we are the operator of the landfill, and we do have specific mandate in that space.
Yeah, I don't think that really answered my question, and because I'm trying to work out. So, are you telling me where it says minor here, in regards to improved landfill and gas and wastewater gas capture was minor, divert biosolids and minimise emissions from wastewater treatment minor? I'm just looking at these. I would have thought at least they have quite a significant impact. And one of the things I'm looking at was around the flare of gases and how that can be used for energy. And there's some really easy wins across the city and across for the DCC in this area that would make an impact. And trust me, I'm not the greenest person around the table, as everybody knows, but I can see where technology can really make an impact. I don't really see that captured here.
Absolutely, that's why we do feel we need to progress actions across all different sectors. However, for the city footprint, for DCC footprint, flaring gas would be excellent. At the city scale, it doesn't have such a large impact, just because the scale of city emissions is so large, and transport and agriculture are the largest portion of citywide emissions.
Bear with me, Mr. Mayor. Again, I see there's 4 councils around the country that currently do this work and flare the gas. Mr. McLean, do we have any plan to do that in the near instance? And I guess that's also part of a long-term plan question.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we do that. We actively do that. Yeah.
Do we convert it to energy?
Oh, thank you. Yes, we do. The Green Island wastewater treatment plant is powered from gas captured at Green Island landfill.
And speaking of things, will there be numerical reporting of carbon emissions reduction on a quarterly basis to that committee?
We do our city footprints every 3 years. These things do take time to shift, so quarterly emissions for the city would be a very expensive exercise and wouldn't probably give us much information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Following on from that, does that mean, so in 2027 we'll get another report? Is that what you're saying on our carbon footprint as a city? Is that what you just said, what just was saying?
I think it might be next year. Our last one was, I think, 21, 22. So 3 years after that.
Following on from some of the things Councillor Vandervis was saying, I do actually agree with them around it's, you know, because critics of this will say, how much is that costing? What's that going to mean for rates? What's it going to mean for, you know, all those implications? The other thing, so I'd really like to see that broken in and not just said it's BAU. I think we need to know what the costs are for it. But also, I think it'd be great to show, because a lot of people who do go carbon zero and say that they have benefits and cost savings for their businesses, particularly businesses. So it would be really good to also show if there's any, what the cost savings were, because it might be it costs, you know, X amount to do a thing, but it maybe it saves them double. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We know in this space that often the costs of action might be capital costs, but there's often long-term savings, there's other co-benefits for health and many other areas. And there's also costs of inaction as well. So one of our guiding principles for the program is to consider value in all meanings of that word.
Well, thank you for that answer. It does. Your answer, though, sounded a bit like well-beings to me, which well-beings are great. I'm all for well-beings. However, like what I was meaning specifically is things like, for example, if say a business went completely digital, all of a sudden they don't have to pay for paper, and you know what I mean? Like, so you can actually show actual things that this is an actual cost saving. Do you get what I'm meaning?
I might take that, Councillor. We are seeing that with our carbon zero procurement standards now. We've the first tender we applied that, or request for tender, we applied that to the winning tender. Their carbon zero proposal was cheaper than what they would have traditionally done. So we are deriving some value from that, yes.
And another question, along this deepen partnerships with and collaboration, it's got very high. Sorry to say this, but I can remember saying this 4 years ago, you know, that we need to build the relationships, and I know other councillors have raised Business South with 1,300 odd members. Where are we at with that?
Building partnerships is really important. Zero Carbon Alliance is one of those partnerships. We work with many different organisations. I would say that the Zero Carbon Alliance has been working really effectively to date, and we've been able to unlock good conversations, good progress on projects that, you know, individually we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do. And it was clear when we made the Zero Carbon Plan that working in partnerships and working alongside others is really vital, because as GCC we can't do this all alone. We do need to work with other organisations. We need change from the central government, regional council, all of those things. So yeah, we are working hard in that space.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Because what I would say is you'll probably find that some businesses in our city are actually way ahead of us, because the market's demanding it if they're exporting. You know, like international markets want them to be carbon zero, and it's actually a selling point. Have we looked at that in detail, and is that something we're going to do more of? Because it is a selling point for our city, I believe, would it not be? If we were able to say that.
The Communities and Economies chapter of the Zero Carbon Plan does touch on that. It was clear in creating the plan that there are commercial and competitive advantages for businesses undertaking this action. And you're right, it is something that the market is demanding more and more, and will continue to do so. So in terms of the role of DCC in that space, we have been supporting through a pilot the smaller businesses that might not have the capacity to look at those things themselves. We've been supporting them to begin that work so that they can also reap those benefits as well.
Have we considered asking some of those businesses that are leading the way already to come and do presentations around the city or to Business South and say how successful it's been for them to take those steps? Is that something we've considered? Because would it not be a good idea?
Yes, that is part of that same program that I mentioned, that we're hoping to do that in the coming year.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. And first of all, follow-up question to Councillor Houlihan on that pilot, because you say here on the bottom of page 19 that the initial pilot is complete, and this is one of the few areas in this plan that there's very high emissions reduction potential. So I'm intrigued if the pilot's complete. Have we, published something? Are we, what's happening with that?
So we had a debrief meeting with the supplier, I think it was last week. That was really positive. They've got a draft report that's coming our way to consider, and what we'll do is we've got some thinking to do on that and how we can strengthen it even further, potentially targeting different sectors, those kinds of considerations. So we'll be doing that work over the next few weeks or months, and then look to run it again.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is a follow-on from Councillor Wiley's questioning. And the other area where it's very high potential emissions reduction is in the developed partnerships and collaboration. And if you look at C2.4.3, which is effectively the zero carbon work that we're doing within the council, and I think what Councillor Wiley was trying to ask, and he was specifically talking about waste, is like what actually... and I think your answer was that in the citywide it didn't have much impact. But I mean, this seems to me that this is one area that we could potentially have a big impact. And I'm just trying to. I know he didn't think he got the answer before, and what work's happening there.
So I might have a crack at that if I may, Deputy Mayor. So for the organisation, definitely the biggest levers we can pull are in waste and transport and three waters, and we are investing in those. I think Ms Reynolds' point earlier was, so that's for the organisation, they're by far our biggest. At a citywide level, so everybody else outside the DCC, agriculture is very large, as is transport in terms of all of the cars that drive around, the vehicles, and our ability to influence that, which gives it the ranking, is well, that gives the ranking as DCC's ability. We have ability over our own fleet, so we're electrifying our fleet, but we have limited ability to influence outside of the organisation. So, but in terms of our activities, investment, we're putting investment into transport and waste and three waters.
And obviously our investment in our new curbside system will have a big impact. And I've just got one last question, and it's a specific question on page 14 on T6.18.1, where it's talking about a feasibility study of the inland freight hub. And I know as part of the FDS that the submitter has done some significant work, and I'm just intrigued that we say that we're the lead on this and that the freight hubs are being investigated. So I know that this is quite a big piece of work. So we're doing this because it needs to look at transport movements more than just within Dunedin if we're looking at freight hubs. So I'm intrigued that we're actually doing work in this space.
It is to support RTC activity. Okay. Yep.
Next, next question is Councillor Gilbert, followed by Councillors Benson Pope and Gary.
Thank you. Again, going to do one of my trampolini ones and bounce around the page a wee bit. On page 10, R 1.4.9, deliver a pilot program for construction waste separation. The short question is, how's it going? The longer question is, how's it going and how many companies have been contacted? And the preface to the longer question is, I've been dealing with at least 3 other companies with a different hat on, none of whom knew that there was any activity that was taking place until they were approached by me with a different hat on. So I'm just wondering how that one's going.
We'll have to come back to you on the detail of those pilots. Thank you, Councillor.
I do know one local company, Cook Brothers, who are actively working in this space. So, but we'll make sure that we follow up.
Thank you.
Oh.
It's yeah, it's the bracelet putting my weight balance off. Where am I? I am on same page, 1.5.1. Continue to expand provision of waste minimisation information and education. And you say there that opportunities being investigated. What progress, what time frame?
So that work is being progressed. An update will be provided at the next ISCOM meeting.
Thank you. And now the trampolini, but A1 mentions that education and specifically mentions education around diversion, and then uses the fix-it cafes, as I call it, as reference in terms of diverting stuff that's in the waste stream from getting to landfill. But my question is, given that the education element, as we have discussed about the size of the curbside bins and the frequency of collection, is reportedly proving challenging for some, can you give any idea of what initiatives are being investigated to assist in reducing the volume of waste being created in the first place, thereby helping those who are struggling with the size of bin and the frequency of collection?
Specific initiatives I can't give you details on. We could come back to you on that. I would say though that the action area number 2, so basically looking at circularity, that is something that if we have a more circular use of resources, there would be less going to landfill because things are used more and more and designed better and those kind of things. So there's some work going in that with our partners, again the Zero Carbon Alliance, but yeah, in terms of other specific initiatives, would have to come back to you with details.
I think Mr McLean will have taken note of that, and Mr Henderson will be able to provide an update, because that seems exactly the kind of thing that team should be making sure that we're getting information out about.
Thank you. And my final question is, again, back to relationships. What relationships with other councils, etc., do we have, or are we trying to build, or are we trying to invent the wheel each time?
We've got really positive relationships with the ORC and other Otago councils, so our counterparts. We really try hard not to reinvent the wheel. We've got enough of a big task and work to do, so we really collaborate in that space. There's also a national network, the Aotearoa Climate Officers Network, I think it's called, and we share resources, ask questions, and give learnings on projects that we've done. So we've contributed to that, and we've been the recipient of a lot of really good information. So yeah, we try really hard not to reinvent the wheel. So
lots of collaboration and sharing across the country to help, so that we're all in the same boat trying to... Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you. I think you should be congratulated on the detail of this work and the breadth of it. And I think as we look at it, there's a question coming. As we look at it, we see just how deeply into our community all these various aspects reach. My question is triggered by a comment on page 16 about energy efficiency, and the irony of asking this the day after the government's announced a further accelerated search for fossil fuels isn't lost on me. But while those topics focus on community support, insulation, warm heating and so on, and we know the reasons for that given Professor Howden Chapman's work in that healthy homes area, why is it that we never talk about double glazing as part of that equation? Or have we, and I've missed that in the papers? And just that in terms of insulation, domestic insulation, that's a really important component, but it seems to me it's slipped off the discussion table. Is that accurate observation?
I would need to check with the housing team about that. I think in terms of sort of the costs of doing the work, I think insulation for the energy gains that you get is, the lowest hanging fruit. In terms of whether there's any work or thinking underway about that, it possibly falls into E 1.3.2, not sure, so we'd need to come back to you with more detail on that.
I'm asking that too because there's reference in here somewhere of the access or the ineligibility of some higher or people who don't have community service cards to get funding of various kinds, which might be available or might not, depending on other organisations. And I'm just wondering, given that retrospective double glazing is not hugely expensive always, doesn't have to be, I wondered if you could come back to me on that, please, any work that is happening.
Sure, yeah.
Very good. Councillor Gary.
Ms Reynolds, on a lighter note, could you tell me on page 10 what a fadge bag is? I have absolutely no idea.
A wall pack. It's another name for a wall bale pack.
Very good. I have a more serious question now too, and my second question is around not-for-profits. Has any thought been given in terms of citywide emissions to the fact that we've got some large not-for-profits in our city, and everyone's trying to, they're at different points around assessing their emissions and getting their carbon footprint, and don't always know where to go. Any guidance for them, any work being done to assist in that and support, and even in a simple way with a template or whatever?
Not-for-profits is one of the questions that we're going to be exploring through the business transition support pilot when we're reviewing how that went and what we want to do in the future. I suppose one of the questions is, do we prioritise things on footprints, and would not-for-profits have a large footprint or not? So I suppose if it ends up that not-for-profits aren't prioritised through the next round, we could look at other ways to support them instead. Yeah.
So there's thinking going on, which is great to hear. And finally, and this was mentioned in passing, but I think it's a really important question, is turning our mind to the cost of not carrying out these actions. Do you have any comments around that? Because often we get questions and comment around the cost of doing, but it's the cost of not doing that keeps me awake at night.
Absolutely. Cost of inaction. I mean, there's numerous costs of inaction on climate change, many of which will be borne by future generations, but there's also missed opportunities. Say if we were able to get more people, for example, travelling in an active manner, there's co-benefits for health and social well-being and those kind of things. So yes, there are definitely a lot of costs of inaction, and that's something that we do try and be conscious of in our team when we do our work.
Thank you.
Just a very yes or no question, really. Is there someone in the Carbon Zero team with the title of a Community Implementation Officer?
No, we have someone whose title is something like Communications and Engagement Advisor, which would probably be the closest.
Yeah, no, that's very close. Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just been on the internet, on the DCC website, looking for some of the supporting information. I note on page 19 there's a zero carbon policy guidance documents were completed and published for infrastructure projects, small projects, events and strategy. And are these just published for internal use and not for external? So I'm particularly interested in events. It's like, how are we supporting events to become zero carbon?
Correct, those are internal documents as they relate to our DCC internal policy.
So have we looked at producing any of those documents to help our partners? I sit on the grant subcommittee, so it's like, if we're going to be giving out money, surely we should be asking for their zero carbon initiatives. So have we got any support or documents that can help those organisations?
There is sort of guidance online. I would need to check with the events team as to what is specifically provided or asked for, and it probably would depend on the size of the event and the size of grants and those kinds of things as well.
My next question, I just want to go back. I think one of the councillors asked about the Zero Carbon Business Transition Support Program, and that there is a draft report coming. The tourism industry have had some delivery of some of these programs, which to be honest, can't see impact from. So I'm just wondering if there is follow-up satisfaction survey and any change in behaviour from the organisations that have been through that support program to actually see if it's worked.
There will be follow-up. It's just recently completed, so I think the supplier is planning to follow up maybe twice in future months. Yes, in terms of the usefulness of the program for the participants, that's something that we'll be reflecting on and building into the design for the future. The design of, we took learnings from the previous tourism programs and other programs like the Great South one. So we did design it a little differently. For example, rather than looking at the specific, making sure that the footprint was ISO standard aligned and ticked all the boxes, which can be quite complex. We looked more, we took a sort of a high level picture that was more action oriented and provided people with those next steps.
My next question is around the Business South relationship again, and I guess is Business South a member of the Zero Carbon Alliance?
Business South is not currently a member of the Zero Carbon Alliance.
So I'm just wondering, because they offer some sustainability options, about how the relationship between the council and Business South works.
Do you mean in the carbon space?
Yeah, in the carbon space. In the carbon space, because some of these deliveries, I've written Business South, but a huge number of them, wondering how they're in the room having these conversations, and that also applies for the waste minimisation.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Florence, how was the membership of the Zero Carbon Alliance determined?
It's based on an MOU that Council signed off, I think, several years ago now. The MOU sets out how members can be added. I would say that we are aware of the importance of Business South's role in the city and the membership base that they do have, and do work with them on various projects on that kind of basis, which the Alliance may not be the best forum for those projects that we are working with them on, for example, this business pilot, because it's, I guess it's more business focused and DCC focused and less sort of university or OSC.
Could I suggest, picking up on what you're saying, Councillor Barker, I wondered that as part of the discussion today in the resolution, you might want to suggest that the Alliance formally consider inviting Business South?
Is today the time to do that?
I would think that you could, given that we've been talking governance, that it relates, and there does seem obvious links, albeit they may not be the best vehicle, but at least that way we would be able to track it and get a response about what was happening.
I'll add that to number 3. My next question was so many of these actions are around waste, and I just wonder, well, I mean, we've had an update on the waste minimisation plan, but I'm just not too sure how they're aligning. So what the deadline is for I know there's a new waste minimisation plan. How do we line up reporting on the current one, and then understanding the deadline for the new one?
Are you referring to the deadline for the waste minimisation plan, or?
Yeah, it's the waste minimisation plan, because there's a huge amount of actions in here that relate to waste, and a lot of them are, I guess, business as usual. So I'm just wondering how the zero carbon plan and the waste plan align.
We've been working really closely at a staff level, and I would say that reducing waste is very positive for emissions. So there is that natural alignment.
Thank you. My next question is page 14? There was as part of the George Street Retail Precinct upgrade, DCC ran a trial with e-bike courier services and provided incentives for businesses to participate, and I just wondered where the results of that trial might be.
We'll follow that one up and bring it back. Thanks, Councillor.
Done.
I had foreshadowed that I was going to move something and have the deadline is December, but I've had advice from the Chief Executive Officer that we should put October in. I'm just foreshadowing
so you
it.
finished with your questions?
Yep.
Yes. So, Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Following on from the question Councillor Barker asked about events, and I'm just wondering if, because of course we don't know the impact of an event until it's had a sustainability audit, like until they know what sort of impact they're having. Like, do we do sustainability audits, and do we help people do them? Where do we sit with that?
So for DCC events, or you probably wouldn't do it for a very small thing, but for large events that have a citywide kind of scale, the zero carbon policy and the zero carbon events guidance does set out proactive things that people can consider, and it does have an assessment in there around the types of elements that might have an emissions impact. For example, where people are coming from, how they might be moving around the city, and things that event organisers could do to mitigate some of those impacts before they occur.
Thank you. Given we've only got 6 years to reach our target of 2030, is that audited in any way? And the reason I ask that question is that I did a master's paper in sustainability, and we looked at sustainability audits very closely and some case studies on them. And I also was involved in one in a school, at a school fair, and the amount of stuff that came just from a school fair was huge, but you didn't know that until you actually broke it down, and then you're able to say exactly what the problem were, and then you're able to look at solutions, because if you don't know the problem you can't get a solution. So is it possible for us to be able to do something like that, an audit, say for example with any sort of festivals that we fund quite a lot of, or are our own festivals, to say let's have staff auditing it so we know what the impact of that is?
Thanks, Councillor. We're not resourced at the moment to do that, but that might be something that we bring back as part of the medium or high investment package for council to consider if that's a function that we should undertake.
Okay, because if we're not going to do it, do we support Enviro schools, and do they work with schools to do the every fair? Because fairs do have a big impact. Are you working with Enviro schools?
I wouldn't be able to tell you whether Enviro schools work with schools around their fairs, but I can tell you they do a great job working with schools generally, and we do work with Enviro schools in the education kind of space, and there are some staff based in DCC that work with Enviro schools as well.
Thank you. If we don't know answers to these questions or have plans for sustainability audits, how are we going to achieve 2030?
The largest areas of emissions reduction needed to reach our targets are in the transport space and then the energy space. So while events do have an impact, I would say that changes to commuting and those kind of things probably would have a larger impact in terms of reaching those targets.
But wouldn't it be fair to say that if we had these things, if they were audited and were then able to mitigate a lot of those issues with the events and fairs and things like that, that would take some of the pressure off the transport system too, wouldn't it?
Potentially, particularly if these were events where a large number of people were travelling to. But as Mr McLean mentioned, that's not something that we've got the resourcing to do specifically. There is guidance for people running events based on the zero carbon policy that does set out some of those considerations to apply prior to the event happening.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Mr McLean, to go back to my earlier question about Green Island, I notice the purchase and install gas engine at Green Island landfill is a priority action and is on track. I also note that when I did a quick Google search, Winds Engineering Group in Pororua have got a contract through the GETS site to do that, and the landfill requires a new enclosed gas flare to ensure the conversion of gas to carbon dioxide is maximised and relevant regulations are complied with. So with that work taking place, do we have an idea of what we would be reducing the emissions by and that sort of technology?
So the install of the gas engine, so there is already one there, but this is a larger one. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'm sure that that information does exist, modelled through the DCC emissions reduction plan, so we could come back to you with that.
Brilliant. Councillor O'Malley.
Does that affect our ETS charges? Because we're converting methane to carbon dioxide, do we get a reward for that?
I believe so. I believe if we destroy more of the gas, that would reduce our ETS liabilities.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. You've mentioned about biogenic, so agri emissions. It sounds like we're just too hard basket not going there just at the moment. My question is that I know there is at least one business in town who is fairly far down the track of something to do with seaweed, going into a particular seaweed only found in New Zealand that reduces emissions by up to 90%. So I'm just wondering whether we're out talking to groups like this, and I have no idea how you do a test on a farm of cows as to their emission rates, whether they go up or down if they're eating this particular seaweed. But are we dealing with companies like this, or are we just kind of going, we'll deal with that later?
So the biogenic methane targets that council set align with the national, well, the government, the national biogenic methane reduction. In terms of what we're doing, that is something on our radar. In the agriculture space, I believe that the economic development team is interested in progressing work around innovations in agriculture. But I also know that there's a lot of work across the whole country looking at technologies and innovations for ag. So there could be, great stuff happening in Dunedin, but if something is developed somewhere else, we might also implement that here as well to help reduce our emissions.
Right. That is the last questioner I have. Are there any more? No. So Councillor Barker's indicated a desire to amend and a willingness to move. Yes.
Lynn's just getting it up there. Doesn't have to be the perfect format, because my formatting wasn't brilliant. That's not the one. Oh, that's part of it. There's more in it. There was 3 parts of them.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see, I didn't scroll down.
Yep. Look, you didn't make a single mistake with that typing. It was very good. It's all bold.
Practice under pressure.
That's very good. Yeah, that's amazing.
Is that
Righty-ho, that is what I propose to move. Is there a seconder?
yes? Do you have a seconder for that, Deputy Mayor Lucas?
There's a few. That's great. Thank you. In moving this, it's great to see the plan, the implementation plan here, and back in July, the next step said that there would be a progress report coming. And I guess part of the challenge and the number of questions that everyone asked is how do we actually focus on the progress that's been made? And there's been some questions also asked about how do we measure the progress that's been made. So I think that we're going to note it, that's cool, but referring it to come back to the advisory panel to refine the implementation plan for approval, because I think we've got a lot of stuff in there that's the business as usual stuff that's either complete or ongoing. We need to clarify the partner-led activities as well, like who's leading the partners, so that when we're having these conversations with our partners that we understand where they're at. And I see, as I think I said before, that the Otago Regional Council have just brought out their own plan, so we need to know how those integrate together. Feedback on some of the current actions. I think there were a number of councillors who were particularly interested in how we were working with business. And also, I think I brought up the events as well, because I see there was some work done around events, but as sitting on the grant subcommittee, we definitely want to have a look at that, and then looking at how, as we as council, actually communicate what we're doing. When I looked on our website, it was really hard to find anything, quite frankly, apart from the carbon zero plan. So we need to do that. Also, I think we might need to look at doing some new actions. When we look at, there's a lot there around waste, which is already being covered by the waste minimisation plan, but transport is our biggest emitter at 34%. And I was looking through the actions and I feel like we've missed something along the way on how we're going to be dealing with those transport emissions, and I would like us to focus on that, because that after agriculture at 46%, the transport is what we need to focus on. So I think we just need to drill down in that, and then we also need to be aligning this with our strategic refresh and making sure that that's happened. C, request that the Zero Carbon Alliance invites Business South to become a member of the Zero Carbon Alliance. I think I've been asking for that for a long time, and some of the feedback that we got was that the Zero Carbon Alliance didn't feel that they wanted to invite Business South. And for me, that's a great big gap. as I said, they've got 1,300 members, they're committed to carbon positive, and I was at a business after 5 function last week and got strong feedback that there were various business members who are absolutely committed to zero waste, carbon positivity, and they're having challenges with their relationship at the council. And this person that I was talking to was totally fed up, and I promised them that we would work harder at our relationship with Business South so that we can bring the businesses on board, because we're all working together as a city to get stuff done. So they absolutely need to be in the room.
Okay. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm sorry to say this, but I cannot believe that 4 or 5 years later we're still talking about inviting Business South to become a member of the ZCA. I mean, I've raised this so many times, so have other councillors. It is unbelievable. With more than 1,300 members, they should be one of the first to be asked. And the economic benefit to businesses being carbon zero is huge. Internationally, there's, for exporting, international markets are demanding it, and they're going to get far bigger pickup on exports if they're able to say they're carbon neutral. It is just a no-brainer. I mean, and I would actually say that there's probably a lot of businesses in our city that are way ahead of us that are probably already carbon neutral. And also the questions I asked before around sustainability audits. I mean, part of a situation is if you don't know what the problem is, you can't solve it. And an example of that was when I did we did an audit on a school fair. Now, little things that you don't think of. For example, a lot of people brought baking, but they put it on. Put Glad wrap all over the baking, to cover it when it came. And we were able to see that when we did the audit, because we broke down all the rubbish and had it broken down into different bits. It was a bit gross because we had to put gloves on and go through all the rubbish and everything. But you quickly saw where the problem areas were. And what we're able to do is say for the next fair, instead of putting Glad wrap, put a tea towel over it, take your tea towel away. We had crockery instead of takeaway cups and things. And we had all those things, though, once you know they're a problem, you can solve them. But for example, for the larger events in our city, they'll be aware of some of them, but if they're not doing an audit on it, they won't know the percentages. They won't know where the problem areas are. And then if you know what the problem areas are, you can say to people, look, can you bring a carry cup with you? Or can you do this or do that. And they could do that in some of their messaging. But without knowing it, how can you do it? And without us taking action on these things now, where are we going to be in 2030? I think it's unbelievable that we've only got 6 years to go and we're still talking about this. This is like Groundhog Day. I can remember having exactly the same speech 4 years ago.
Councillor O'Malley.
I would have to say I think we've moved a fair way along in the last 4 years, and I did originally give those speeches in the first 2 years saying we appear to be planning and not moving, but I would have to say the team now appears to be moving, and I really, to part B of this motion, I would remind us and the team that when you have an action list, you have to have actual actions, and you need to be able to prioritise the order in which you're going to do it. And last year, Councillor Barker and I supported her, basically said that if the plan comes forward without identifying how you're going to fund it, we weren't really willing to go forward because we were still in the planning and not execution stage. And I know that there was some mention on social media that seemed to be some sort of pushback on the plan, but in fact what it really was the other way around. And that is, if an activity is going to happen, it has to be funded. So the discipline of taking your plan and then applying it over to the LTP to say where and how you're going to execute it was what I felt was a necessary request to come from governance. And I think that's really what that Zero Carbon Advisory Panel is maybe, and that's certainly what I would plan on doing while I'm on it, is not to go in there and fiddle with the plan, but to make sure, in fact, it is properly resourced and it is resourced in the order such that we have the biggest impact. Because remember, our impact is to get carbon neutral by 2030. That's the target. We should get as close as we can. I agree that we have lost a lot of time in planning at the start, but I would have to say now this team has integrated the plan well into the major council units, and you can see basically it's 3 waters and transport that are taking up a lot of the big hitting in terms of this. So I think it's come a long way. I think the integration's worked really well, and I congratulate the team for getting this far, and I look forward to interacting with them in a way to support them to their objectives, which is our objective because we asked them to do it.
Okay. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for that, because you said it much better than I could have. And I think you really did capture the key essence of what this is about. Again, like anything, we could always pick pieces apart from this, but actually this is a good starter. I can agree with 90% plus of it. When you get down to the worrying about the last 10%, then actually do you vote against it, or do you actually support because of the amount of good work and the amount of detail that we have here? And I think that's the part that I look at, and I think we do have a clear pathway for me to move forward on this, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've made this speech before recently around this table, but we need to look to ourselves around resourcing, and I'll come to that in a moment. I want to thank the team. This work has never been more important, and we're long beyond labels such as greenie, lefty. It's not an outlier. This is mainstream work, our zero carbon work. And it's never been more important that in a time when we have a central government who are back to looking at exploration for fossil fuels as of yesterday's decision. The critical question we should be asking as we move through this is ask not only what this work will cost, but ask what will inaction cost, because that, in my mind, is the critical question. There was a comment made in the debate around why isn't transport there? Well, transport's not there because we've lost the funding, the co-funding. This government has taken away the funding for those transport initiatives that were so important to us in realising our zero carbon goals. I want to finish by acknowledging the expertise and smart thinking of our zero carbon team. We are very lucky to have them doing the job, and our job as governors is to resource this team to do this critical work as we move forward, and that is what will allow it to be carried out.
Thank you. Now, are there any further speakers? Councillor Fiso.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor. Can you take this in parts? I actually can't. I don't support number C. I echo Councillor Gary's reference to resourcing work, and I think before we talk about inviting others to join the alliance, I think we need to actually take seriously the need to resource the staff. The staff is a tiny team, and they have done an amazingly huge job, and I think it's been actually complicated and added to by this work. So can you please take it apart? Thank you.
Certainly. No other speakers. Your right of reply, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great to hear all of the praise for the plan coming from councillors, and also the talk about resourcing it. We did make a promise to our community when I wasn't part of council then, when we declared a climate emergency, and also put the work into creating this plan. I agree with Councillor Hurley, we're talking about Business South as a partner around the businesses of being carbon neutral, and also around the events, but we need to make sure that we are making it easy for them and providing the tools, and I think that is part of the plan, but we need to clarify that we're going to work on that. I don't think it's Groundhog Day. I mean, Groundhog Day was when we were going, where's the plan, where's the plan, where's the plan? Now we have a plan in front of us, we have an implementation plan, and we need to make sure that we've got the commitment to carry on with that. Councillor O'Malley talked about prioritising the actions as well, which is that biggest bang for buck kind of thing, and also the discipline that we need to have to fund and execute the plan and make sure that we've got it properly resourced. And that word resource keeps coming up again and again and again, and that's going to be part of our LT process as well. It was also the remark that the plan was well integrated into the DCC units, and we've seen all of that through, and I think that's around thinking about the BA business as usual stuff, and then about the prioritisation of the plan. And also I'm just going to hop over to Councillor Gary talking about the transport initiatives and the government changing. I think we need to put the initiatives in, because governments do change, and if we don't have it in our plan, then we can't advocate to whatever new funds appear. And then Councillor Wiley, it's good to see you agree with 90% of it, and I think the 10% is sometimes a challenging bit, but it's great that you see that there is a clear pathway to move forward as well. And I also agree with Councillor Garrett asking what will inaction cost, and I think that it's really positive that we are moving forward on this. Councillor Fiso, I'm disappointed that you can't support C. Business South, from my opinion, one of the delivery partners, and should be in the room. We've got the University, the Zero Carbon Alliance, we've got the University in the room, the Polytech in the room, but we don't have that voice of actually a lot of the businesses who are most of the small businesses, and how can we help them to make sure that as a community we are also delivering. Thank you.
So I'll put the motion and we'll go with part A. We'll do all three separately. So part A, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Part B, referring the proposed plan to the panel. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And part C, request that that Business South be invited. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? No. Thank you. Now, continue. We've got two relatively small-looking items. Anyway, the non-trading council-controlled organisations application for exemption, item 12 on your agenda. Does anyone wish to say anything in advance of that, Chief?
I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Vandervis.
When it says on page 102 that they want to be exempted from the requirement for full reporting and other requirements imposed by the Local Government Act, is having to report carbon footprints one of the things that they're going to be exempt from?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, so that being the case, I'll move that Council does grant an exemption for those five mentioned organisations. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. To me, this is just a straightforward administrative activity, because all those companies are in abeyance. Does anyone else have anything to say? Okay, in which case I'll put...
Clarify that question that Councillor Vandervis asked. Are you saying that these organisations don't have to follow carbon zero? Is that what was said?
The non-trading companies. So we simply registered the names and have them held as...
Yep. They're only nominal.
Yes.
No activity, but nominal.
But the Local Government Act requires that they are granted an exemption to all of those requirements annually, and this is that exemption request.
Okay, so we're able to put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 13.
Happy to second.
Events. Proposed event road closures. I don't think... Are there any questions? I hear none. So moved by Councillor Wiley and seconded by Councillor Vandervis. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay. Notice of motion. We have a notice of motion, which we have in front of us. Which has been submitted and moved by Councillor Gilbert. There is a seconder, I presume. But you'll speak to it. Who's the seconder?
No.
Remember, once you second it, you can't amend it, so you just need to be certain that the wording is as you want.
So perhaps are there any questions of Councillor Gilbert? Sorry. So now, no, we're going to take questions and then we'll have a seconder and then you'll speak to it. Yeah. So I just thought, in case there's a desire for an amendment, as the Chief's pointed out, we'd better have some questions first. Councillor Vandevers.
Councillor Gilbert, as the mover of this motion, would you be open to changing it slightly and changing A to be a possible unitary authority for the Dunedin Territorial Authority area, on the basis that getting a unitary authority just in this area might be quite a lot easier than trying to do it for all of Otago?
The concern that has been raised, yes, I agree that for all of Otago is something of a consideration, but as soon as we start talking about Dunedin, we're then automatically talking about interaction with the Otago Regional Council, which then extends, so there needs to be some discussion around that, which part of my speech covers, but we'll get to that later. That then is very prescriptive and prescribed, which is what my very first original attempt at a notice of motion was, and got turned down quite distinctly particularly through local government commission.
Make a comment. Would it be worthwhile having Dunedin and or Otago, just to cover the possibilities?
Unitary council, unitary authority options? No?
Authorities, plural.
That might imply then that there's unitary authorities all over Otago. Sorry.
So, point of order, Mr. Mayor. That's pretty extraordinary. We know what the standing order is. We know what the procedure is about moving a notice of motion. One, I think it's a bit unusual that the mover gets to be asked questions anyway. I don't recall that ever happening in a number of notices of motion we've had historically. And for us now to be in a negotiation about what might be in the motion makes it even weirder. So it would be nice if we could stick with standing orders, please.
I'll provide some advice on this.
Actually, that was a point of order. Raised the term point of order, so I assume it needs.
So, Councillor, are you raising that as a point of order? Right. Which one?
I'm assuming breach of standing orders.
26(4).
Mr. Mayor, if I might provide some advice. So, Councillor Benson Pope, you are saying that your point of order is 25.2E? No, but that's a breach of standing orders. So you're saying your point of order is a breach of standing orders, correct?
Yes, that's correct. The one that immediately see around notice of motion is alteration is also 26(4).
I might provide you some advice, Mr. Mayor, on that.
Certainly.
Yeah, well, 26(4) allows the mover, with the agreement of the meeting, to amend a motion if it has not been seconded, which is currently where we are at.
And was exactly the advice you provided, which is why we had a small negotiation with them how else are you going to determine whether you have the support of the meeting to change it unless there is a discussion about changing it with the mover? So I'm not upholding the point of order. There we go. Anyway, back to the negotiation. Can you see a better, based on the discussion so far, can you see a better way of framing the notice of motion that allows for all manner of possibilities? Well, that's what I said, and or Dunedin.
A question to the mover. I guess you're asking for a report on options for progressing discussions about a possible unitary authority for Otago. So my understanding of that is you may get in those options you may get a wider Otago option or a Dunedin-centric option. Would that be fair to assess?
That is the intention behind the motion, yes, to have a discussion about what option or options there may or may not be.
I've just thought of a simple change, very simple change. Instead of the for Otago, say in Otago. Unitary authority in Otago. As opposed to for all of Otago, it's just in Otago, whether that's all of or, more than or less than, it's okay.
I think I'll leave it as is, and we can run from there. And the intention, hopefully through my speaking to it, the intention behind it will be made abundantly clear. I have tried certainly to write it in such a way that there can be no confusion over the intention behind the motion.
Okay. Is there a second to it? So it's been moved by Councillor Gilbert and seconded by Deputy Mayor Lucas. You may speak to it, sir.
Thank you. Right, so this motion I thought had been drafted to be less onerous on staff time than one that had been passed unanimously in 2017 and then ultimately that lay dormant on a desk, perhaps at least in part because of the volume of staff time that would be required. To request a report that covers all possible eventualities of a governance adjustment and the preferred option, along with all expected benefits, which is what the Local Government Commission has indicated would be required for an investigation, is a mammoth amount of work to request from staff and then to expect to see any time before the end of 2025. In the end, this motion is asking for a high-level report, by which I also mean brief, opening a pathway for a discussion about whether the governance system we have in place is the best that we can. It may be that discussion concludes the system we have is the best one. Job done, question answered, we can forget about it and move on. It may be, however, that it decides there are potential benefits of a different structure worthy of further investigation. Be that a unitary council or enhancing a cooperative model like that which is experienced by some councils in the Lower Taranaki. It may also be that there are some who don't understand the intention or even the point of having just a simple conversation. So the simplest way to reassure them that is just that. I'm just asking for a conversation, nothing sinister. A conversation to investigate if we are providing the best for our residents, our city and our region, or, as the Local Government Act puts it in Section 17A, a local authority must review the cost effectiveness of current arrangements for meeting the needs of communities within its district or region for good quality local infrastructure, local public services and performance of regulatory functions. Before we drag legislation into it though, let's just have a chat. For those concerned about it potentially offending the Otago Regional Council, I have spoken with several ORC councillors before putting this motion forward, all of whom agreed that from time to time this conversation is a worthwhile one to have. And I also agree with the ORC Chair, Councillor Robertson, whose statements yesterday in the ODT mentioned that the primary consideration must be whether or not any change would genuinely lead to better outcomes for the communities we are elected to serve. There seems to me to be a belief that this motion is suggesting an all or nothing approach, that we either have the system we have now or a unitary council that covers every inch from Mount Aspiring to the Catlins and then some. I have tried as best and as succinctly as I can to indicate that the discussion I'm calling for is to cover any and all governance options. In my preamble, I thought I'd made it clear with including the benefits or otherwise of a unitary council or other potential changes. For example, it seems to me possible to pursue a unitary council for Dunedin City. However, that would require deep consideration of what happens to the catchment area, hence the need for a discussion. It appears that too much specificity in a motion can lead to it sitting on a desk untouched. Ambiguity in a motion, it seems, is also less than helpful. And in previous iterations of this motion, I've had rather ambiguous comments, including "and any other options." So to be as clear as I can, the intention behind this motion is to instigate a discussion about the governance structure for our city and, by implication and proximity, the region affected by the Otago Regional Council in part or as a whole, and what, if any, changes, tweaks, alterations, amendments, adjustments, improvements, mergers, alignments, cooperative arrangements or any other options not otherwise mentioned that might be beneficial to the residents of said area in terms of cost effectiveness and the provision of expedient, good quality local infrastructure, local public services and performance of regulatory functions.
Speakers. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support this motion. I know particularly that Councillor O'Malley was very disappointed that the unitary one sat on the desk for a while, and I think we've gone through the review with the future for local government as well, which really didn't have. Sorry, that's my phone. I'll just kill it. It came over. Sorry, the future for local government review, where it seems that not many of the suggestions were taken on board. We also at the moment have the ORC representation review, which is looking at cutting the number of Dunedin councillors, so that's a concern to us about having our voices heard. We've also talked many times about who should run transport, whether it should be us or the ORC, and we're very keen to talk about that, especially we've just been talking about carbon zero and the impact that transport has on that. As I said twice, the ORC also doing their climate action plan. We're doing a climate action plan. You can immediately see possibly some duplication there. I think the key thing that Councillor Gilbert has said is better outcomes for the communities we serve. And when I look at, or I hear from many ratepayers about how their bills from the ORC have doubled and ours have gone up as well, we do need to look around those efficiencies to make sure that we're getting the best outcome for our community. So I welcome the report, and I welcome that there would be options that then we can have good discussions about, so we can move forward and do the best for the people of Dunedin.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against this, and it's around timing. In principle, I don't have a problem with it, but as per the last time when staff were exceptionally busy, and a report was not written for that reason, we know that we're entering a long-term plan period. We know that our staff are working exceptionally hard, and it's actually quite overwhelming in some cases, I would suggest to you. You all know the number of vacancies we're carrying at the moment. And we spend a lot of time talking about what doesn't get done. So here we are looking to place yet another report onto an already hugely busy staff leading up to long-term plans. So I'm going to have to vote against it for that reason.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley?
I'm definitely going to vote for this, and I want to go back to what happened last time. And the staff may have been very busy, but it was 2 years. We were told at one point it was there, then we were told it wasn't there, and then in what is one of the worst council meetings I've ever been in, we reversed the decision. We used some standing order rules that were designed to basically make sure there was no debate, and only Councillor Vandervis got to speak at that particular time. And I was ready to speak at that time, but it was shut down. So I'm glad to see it come back to the table. My position has always been that it's Dunedin, not Otago, and it's unfortunate that it has to stay there based on Councillor Gilbert's backwards and forwards with the Local Government Commission. In terms of the catchment concept, that's, I think, fallacious when you consider that Nelson City is a unitary council inside Nelson District Council is also a unitary council. So unless they have a particularly unusual form of water in the Nelson District, I think the catchment argument is quite literally just a mechanism to actually not do it, and it is disturbing that it's coming from the Local Government Commission. Representation on the ORC may very well change for Dunedin, and we may in fact find ourselves no longer in an equal position on that council. And I believe that is already not giving us any, that can be a disadvantage for us, especially in the thing that I think is most strange that it sits with the regional council, and that's transport and the buses, public transport. If that council, if the ORC goes over to a majority non-Dunedin membership, then I believe that we will be at risk when it comes to public transport, because people voting for investment in it are not necessarily even resident in the city. And I go back to, I don't know why central government did that to us when they moved around our control of that system. South Dunedin and climate action change again, are we working together? Or, I mean, we are working together, and the relationship with the ORC is a good one. It has improved a lot since the first motion went up, but it still strikes me as a particularly inefficient duplicity of actions in a territorial area that doesn't need a regional connection. I mean, the transport one became when the 5 cities of Auckland couldn't get their act together. But what are they now? A unitary council. So unitary councils are not that bizarre. They're used in a situation where your territorial authority footprint is large enough that in fact you can take over most of the environmental components that the regional council does, because in fact you do have catchments that are almost entirely in your area. You know, and then, so the bottom line is, I don't see how this is so much work that it couldn't be funded to do, and I think the outcomes, well, will become apparent from the report. And if the outcomes show that it is worthy of going forward, then we'll go forward, and if the outcomes show it isn't, then we won't. But the fact of the matter is, we've never asked the question before. So how's that good governance? Thank you.
Councillor Hulan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I won't be supporting this motion. There's several reasons I won't be supporting it. For the start, Otago is ridiculous, and in my opinion, I mean, I would consider a discussion over Dunedin, but I think we would have had to have had more discussions with ORC before we put that out, if we are meant to be building relationships. I also found it quite amusing that the motion is meant to be about looking at different councils working together collaboratively in a unitary, in a unitary type council. However, the person who put this motion didn't, as I understand it, even speak to the person who put the motion in 2017. That would have been a collaborative, sensible thing to do, in my opinion, to talk to them about what they went through, how the process was. They'd researched it a lot and looked at it. But anyway, this is what we've got, and I won't be supporting it. And I also agree with Councillor Gary around timing. I think the timing of this is horrific. And to say it's a light little thing and only a discussion, when you hear the things that are listed that the motion mover is wanting, is huge, absolutely huge, and to cover the whole of Otago, for staff to look at that is massive, even if it is a light touch. And then, of course, if the information comes back and there's holes all through it, every councillor is going to ask, what about this, what about that? So, whichever way you go, I think it's got problems. For example, I'm just repeating now what Councillor Gary said, but she is correct. We've got an LTP coming up. We've got the hearings for Aurora. We've got, you name it, we've got it this year. We've got workshops coming out our ears. We have so much work on, and as was mentioned previously, we're about more than 80 staff down at the moment. So, you know, to put this on them, I think is irresponsible in my opinion.
Right. Councillor Vandervis.
To get some facts in order regarding the history, Councillor O'Malley is exactly right in what he said. This in 2017 was a unanimous vote for Council to look at the pros and cons of a unitary authority for Dunedin, for the Dunedin area. And the then Chief Executive, CEO Bidrose, essentially sat on it for more than 2 years. The claim that staff were just too busy to do a major unanimous decision of council for more than 2 years, to me is simply absurd. There was very negative politics going on, which I don't want to get into now, and that was the reason that it wasn't looked at then. I have always been very keen on it being looked at. Proposed it for 10 years, in fact before 2017, that I believe there are extraordinary opportunities to reduce division, to reduce duplication, to reduce the inter-council scraps that have been causing literally millions of dollars worth of legal fees over interpretation of council rules by different authorities, whether it's DCC thinking that the 6A amendments for water meant one thing and the OSC thought it meant another. Those discussions with lots of legal costs went on for over a year. All of that kind of waste in our current setup for local government could, in my view, be avoided. I'm going to vote for Councillor Gilbert's motion because his intention is that it claims to open the discussion and for it to be simple. I think Councillor Gilbert is misguided in thinking that we can have a simple discussion not just about a unitary authority for our city, but also one for the whole region. And when Councillor Gilbert says that he's interested in what's best for our city and best for the region, I don't believe it is for us to decide what is best for the region. I think it's up to the rest of the region to decide what they want to do. I think it is for us to decide simply what is best for Dunedin, and that would actually be a much easier target and a much easier report for the staff to write. Councillor Gilbert also says that he wants this to include any and all governance options, unquote. That sounds like an encyclopedic requirement of staff rather than a once over lightly. The lack of focus in this motion does concern me, but I'm going to vote for it anyway because I believe that staff will find the time to actually open the conversation and have, albeit a brief look at what might be done for reducing duplication, division and waste in our local government systems.
Thank you. Councillor Witherall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The public won't be nervous about this motion, however, some elected representatives most definitely will be. I love the reference turkeys and butchers and joint committees don't tend to find common ground. Quite simply, the public who demand greater efficiencies in governance will back this motion. Simplification of governance will not only speed up business, but ultimately see the ratepayers of the region saved a lot of money. Progress will be slow. There is going to be pushback, but just let's start the process of common sense. I'll be voting for this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Fiso.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor. I, like Councillor Houlihan and Councillor Gary, won't be supporting this motion. It is, for me, it is about timing, and I'm not sure if we take seriously the staff are under the pump already with this long-term plan, and I find the expectation or the hope that the report will be done by December this year, on top of everything else we have asked for. I just find it absolutely disingenuous. Further, I do not support this in principle. I want to talk about the 1852 Constitution Act passed in the House of Lords that actually allowed for the creation of colonial governments in New Zealand. We exist, in my opinion, as an abrogation of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And to talk about unitary councils and to talk about governance, we have to take that into account. We are not democratic. We talk a lot about democracy, but this is actually anti-democratic in my opinion. I have spoken at length with Pacifica community reps and also Tangata Whenua community reps in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. The Unitary Council has munted their community development. When they were 5 separate cities, there was so much progress being made at a community level, and the council there was responsive to community needs and proactive in actually helping communities meet their needs, particularly in what's the one that Bob Harvey was the mayor of? Waitakere. So Mr Hyde and all those sorry, I should not be disrespectful, but those politicians that have much self-congratulation about creating the super city of Auckland, they don't have to pay the price of communities in whānau in impoverished areas. So let's be really clear. Access to these tables is already limited and are not diverse and not inclusive. And this, to me, speaks further about that.
Okay. Are there any further speakers? I'll just make a brief comment.
I'll speak.
Councillor Wiley.
I will support this. And there is never going to be the right time to actually have this discussion and basically go through this process. And I think that the key thing is it's a high-level staff report. It's a starter for 10. Is it going to be the be-all and end-all? No. It is starting the process of actually seeing what is possible and what's not possible. We've got to go back and actually look at the Otago Regional Council was set up in 1989 when they basically just changed all the councils around the country. Has it worked? In parts it has. Has it always been good for Dunedin? Sometimes. But the bottom line is we do have to ask the question. We tried to ask the question previously. And, Councillor Gilbert has made, I've known about this all year, that he wanted to bring this motion to the table. So I congratulate him for bringing it to the table now. The bottom line is, as I see it, we're charged with finding out what's the best things we can do for our city. And that is part of actually investigating all options. Those who choose not to vote for it, fine. But can you hand on heart say actually you're looking at the best options for our city? The best connections, the best ability to merge services? We may find out the report may come back and says actually there's going to be no wins in it for either party. But we do not know. So I support this motion and thank you, Councillor Gilbert, for bringing it to the table.
Yes, I'll just make a couple of comments. It was thought unanimously that 7 years ago was the best time to have this motion. However, then it was never acted upon and things changed, and so now here it is again. Now, it's not ideal with the 9-year plan coming up and an awful lot of work. However, the words there are high-level reports, so that can be interpreted to keep it somewhat less than onerous as it might be. So I think rather than, stall it off and leave it, it's better to get with it and open that door to the discussions and let something happen. I think at this point in the piece, we are getting on well with Regional Council and doing a lot of cooperation and collaboration together. But that only lends itself to the possibilities of having a unitary authority for Dunedin. So let's have the discussion and see where we get to and investigate the angles. So, Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with those who've spoken in opposition because of the workload issue. I think the timing is appalling, and we are all aware of things that are either not being done or not progressed with the speed that we would like to see. And I'm loath to add further to that. I'd like to put some more facts on the table. In fact, the fact that the Dunedin City Council at reorganisation time in the period of 86 to 89 actually toured the province under Cliff Skeggs as mayor. He and the then City Secretary Duncan Field and others got in a car. I was the driver actually, and visited all the other local authorities arguing for their support for a unitary authority for the whole of the province. That was scuppered by Queenstown, only Queenstown, because the mayor wouldn't agree, and so that proposal, which would have been an entirely successful development at the time, structurally and organisationally, died the death of Queenstown's selfishness. However, that was a long time ago, nearly 30 years, I think, and I think that was the opportunity to pull that off. I don't think that opportunity exists anymore. I don't think it has for a long time. Politics and practicality aside, I get a bit sick of vague comments about duplication and unnecessary efficiency without any actual examples ever being cited. And I think in most recent times we have much better relationships with the OSC, and I certainly agree that the big problem in that relationship is the issue around public transport, but that's an issue for another day because our policy is clear. So I won't be supporting this suggestion.
Okay. Back to you, Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Just a very quick reply. First of all, in terms of the time frame and the bringing it up now, etc., as reckless as it may be considered by some, as those who have gone through a notice of motion process understand, it's done in consultation with the Chief Executive Officer of the city, who is in charge of the entire staff. So the date that has been chosen and the time frame that has been chosen has been done in consultation with the Chief Executive. Also, Councillor O'Malley mentioned Nelson, so the door's open for that one. I spoke to the Mayor and one of the councillors from Nelson last week. Both of them don't understand why we don't have more unitary councils. In fact, the councillor was surprised to learn that not everybody operated under that model, and the Mayor would rather see everybody. Okay, we are talking a former MP, but still. Is it going to be a simple discussion? No, of course it's not. But because it's awkward, uncomfortable or difficult, does that mean that you don't have the conversation? And that conversation is designed surely to answer the question of, in Councillor Laufiso's words, whether it will munt the city or not. So that's what the conversation is about. It's about picking holes in it. It's about figuring out whether there's any way forward. whatever that is. And as I believe Councillor Wiley said, you've got to start somewhere. And if we don't start the conversation, at some point it's just going to keep coming up. Let's answer it one way or the other at some point, and in a time frame that has been at least in part approved by the Chief.
Okay, let's take it by division.
Councillor Ackland.
Aye.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Benson Pope. Councillor Gary.
No.
Councillor Gilbert.
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan. No. Councillor Lafiso.
No.
Councillor Lucas.
Aye.
Councillor Mayhem.
Yes.
Councillor O'Malley.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
Aye.
Councillor Weatherall.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Mayor Raddick.
Aye.
Carried 10-4.
Thank you. And that is the end of the council meeting, open council meeting. And now I suggest we carry on and do the non-public section, which I hope won't take us too long. So therefore I'd like to move that pursuant to the provisions of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, we exclude the public from the rest of the next part of proceedings. And seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. And I also move that we take a break for 5 minutes to allow the cameras and stuff to be removed. Seconded Councillor Gilbert. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried.